Hello, welcome. Sound Music, Composing Music with Just Sounds by John Kelleher. That's me. So we begin with the key takeaway. It's far from automatic. It is difficult, but at times it is possible to make something musical just out of sounds. Sounds aren't like notes. For us, musical tones have a built-in perceptible relationship to one another. Once you start with do, re, mi, as in the Rodgers and Hammerstein song, a process begins as the song says, "That will bring us back to do." Sounds are not like that. Notes are musically stronger than sounds. For instance, whether it is played by a trumpet or a cello, we hear "Happy Birthday to You" as the same song. The melody is the important thing. The sounds by which the melody was conveyed are far less important. Musicians understand how to use musical tones to create tension and its release, to craft a story about a journey away from home and back again. In C major, home is the note C. You create tension and interest by moving away from C and returning to it. But without notes, there is no C to move to or away from. That's gone. And if C doesn't exist, there can't be any C chord. No universal chord sequence, C, A minor, F, G7, and then back to C. No 1-4-1, 5-4-1, the basic blues progression. That's all gone. Now I'm just going to show you some pretty pictures while you are processing information that's not explicitly visual, but instead occupies your mind. So how do you get music at all under those conditions? In other words, sounds can be interesting in themselves, of course, but how do you get from "that's an interesting sound over here" and "that's an interesting sound over there" to ways of making sounds cohere into patterns in time, so that we readily perceive those patterns and also find them interesting, fascinating? Patterns of sounds that seem to tell stories, that resonate with us emotionally. There are, of course, different ways to organize sounds than those used in the Western classical and popular music that we're familiar with. You can even redefine the word music to mean any sequence of sounds at all, but we're not going to go there. The most basic step forward is to recognize that to some degree, our perceptual system can still instinctively rank order the highness or lowness of sounds. It's not very precise. But somehow, quite often, a normal person can tell you that sound A sounds lower or higher than sound B. I don't know how that works. It seems like our perceptual system is built to try to guess the highness or lowness of sounds, even when they're not musical tones. That's pretty rudimentary, no doubt about it, but patterns are the beginning of art. The first thing I'll show you and play for you is 8 sounds that I have disconnected from each other, playing 1 sound per second so you can hear what's happening. The 2 things I want you to verify for yourself is, first, that they are all different sounds, and second, that they do indeed give us an impression of highness or lowness relative to one another. So I'll play them twice now, and of course, you can repeat this exercise yourself as often as you want. Next, I'll zoom in on the first sound and the second. Notice that the amplitude envelope of each sound looks different. An amplitude envelope is the contour or shape of the volume of the sound through time. When you work with sounds, you have to pay attention to every detail of each sound down to the fineness of about 1/20th of a second. One other thing I want you to notice is the tails of the amplitude envelopes. They're extended. I made them that way for a reason I'll get to in a moment. But first, let me play those 8 sounds in context. Together, they make a short little phrase, as you'll hear now. First, the isolated sounds, and then how they sound all together. And again, the same thing. Let's zoom in on the first couple of sounds in the phrase. I want you to notice that there is 0 silence between sounds. In fact, there's quite an overlap. I cheated. Remember that I made the tails of the amplitude envelopes of each sound long, too long, in fact. Then I told the next sound to start playing while the first sound was still dying out, so to speak. That helped me give a more legato quality to the phrase. Now let's take a look at 2 contrasting phrases made up entirely of sounds. The first phrase we've already heard. The second is similar but contrasting. We want to notice 3 things about these 2 phrases. First, they're similar. Second, they're different. And third, the tails of those 2 phrases, though disconnected in time, register with us and give us a sense of motion and contrast from the low tail of the first phrase to the higher tail of the second phrase. So I'll play the 2 phrases for you now. I want to remind you that there are no pure musical tones at all in this example, but I submit to you we do hear 2 similar but contrasting phrases and a connecting motion between them, which is due to the overall contrasting highness or lowness between the 2 phrases, and particularly the highness or lowness of their tails. So one more time. We're hearing patterns of sound, and we're both contrasting them and connecting them. And that's pretty darn close to what musicians do every day. There's 2 other things that I want to show you. One is about cadences, a very important part of standard musical vocabulary. It is possible to make an analog of a cadence using just sounds. For example, here. The other is using just sounds to fake a kind of harmonic progression. The idea is to make a kind of analog to a melody with accompaniment. It's nowhere near as robust and flexible as a true harmonic progression of musical notes, but it's something. It does have something recognizably like a melody and something recognizably like an accompaniment, and it does have kind of emotional flavor and at least some musical interest. So here's that. It is possible, using just sounds, to create at least some rudimentary but recognizable analogs to things familiar to us from Western classical and popular music. I've included links below to 2 pieces made entirely out of sounds that I did using techniques like the ones I've outlined here. The first is Jokin' Around, which is just a fun Looney Tunes type thing with a repeating chorus. And the second is called Largo, a designation of musical tempo, which customarily means something played slowly and broadly. Some people have said that this piece evokes the emotion sadness. Hope this presentation gives you some of what you need to go on and go further from here.